to the next episode of the podcast. I'm very happy to have Rodolfo here with me, and we used to have like previously a very casual conversations, and we're going to continue with them. So, small introduction from my side. Rodolfo is a ZBrush expert from Maxon. I'm very happy to have him here and to share his story. But mostly, this is going to be more like a casual conversation and more about Rodolfo and the whole progress of his career. But I will let Rodolfo introduce himself and share more things about him.
Well, you already did. Hi, everyone. My name is Rodolfo, and I'm a ZBrush expert trainer at Maxon and a video game environment technical artist. So, yeah, that's it. There's not much to it. Um, and I
Awesome.
like coffee, according to the conversation we were having right before
Yeah,
this started.
I drink that also. I will definitely have a break later and have another
Yeah.
coffee as well. But let's start with like it's pretty unusual to work in like of companies like Maxon. Like usually we don't have guests like working in the softwares, and it's
hmm
like more like a like a dark secret mostly because I didn't had anybody else working in those softwares
hmm
like from Maya, and it's
Yeah.
uh, very hard to get somebody to have on the podcast. But you accepted it, and I'm very happy to have you here. But how did you get interested into the 3D field mostly? Like, let's start with the most basic question.
Oh, okay. So how it all started for me?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting question, but it is a long question, and I'm very happy that this podcast it doesn't have a time limit like most interviews do, right? So, I got interested, well, maybe not in the 3D field, but in video games very early
Mm.
on. That's my big thing. It's video games, right? So, uh, literally, I was learning how to talk, and I was playing video games with my dad, right? It was like 91 or something.
He was
And
playing also video games.
yeah, yeah. So he was a very much my father was a engineer at a time when there were no computer engineers. There were like the first engineering courses in IT were going about, right? So he was one of the first, like in my country, Portugal, right? That started that whole wave of engineers, computer engineers, programmers, IT, and all of that. This was like in the 80s, right? So he was very much a an enthusiast and a collector of video games because he praised video games for their technology, for how they symbolize the peak of technology. To him, that was it, right? And he wasn't really a gamer per se because the concept of a gamer back then didn't exist, right? You were a nerd. That's it. You liked
Yeah.
coding, and you like coding, you like math, you like physics, and you like games, and that's it, right? So nowadays it's a little different, and it's actually kind of cool if you're a gamer. You know what I mean? Back then it wasn't like that. So I grew up with that interest throughout my childhood, and then obviously during my teenage days as well. And I was always very much interested in video games, and I always had a little bit of a I always looked at games a little differently, I guess, from even my nerd peers, let's say, because I had my dad who would give me these magazines, for example, for PC gaming magazines, right? Where you
Yeah,
get the
they were
demo
cool.
discs.
They were
Yeah.
cool.
So you get the demo discs, right? And he would never play, but he would pick games because there were different magazines and they had different demos. Sometimes there was the one hit wonder. For example, when Warcraft 3 released, all magazines had a demo for Warcraft 3, but then the other demos were kind of different. So he would pick those, and then he would read the reviews and the previews with me while I was playing the games. That was a ritual we used
Ooh.
to have, right? So I was very much being introduced to the whole industry and like the way the games are kind of like produced, kind of, even though that was very much obscure in that era. There wasn't like the internet like today, right? It's not like you could just jump on Google and find out how things were done, right? So I was always the kid that was like when we're doing, for example, me and my cousin, Halo's co-op, right? Co-op campaign. I was the one letting him die because I was too busy looking at the fucking textures or something. So I was too busy just looking at the normal maps because that was new at the time. Like the normal maps, like Doom 3 and Halo
Yeah,
2 were like some of the first, right? And I was very, very interested in that. I was like, how the heck do they pack that much detail into a face or into this freaking wall or whatever?
I just
Um,
had I just had so many flashbacks of all of the memories
yeah,
that you mentioned, like with
yeah.
the cities and also the internet connection with the phone.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh
many
yeah.
stuff. But I'm
Yeah.
very happy that you went through that like childhood, because mostly it's like it was like a hybrid generation when we
Hmm.
like we are the first generation that grew up with actually with video games,
Hmm.
and we know the whole process and the whole creativity, and I miss so many games back in the past.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm also on the side that brought me up to work into this industry.
Hmm.
And did you had the chance like to after reviewing those like textures or something like that to try out immediately some like Maya 2003?
No, no. Here's the thing. At the time when Halo came out, I remember there were three moments actually that I remember that kind of hinted. It was like the universe hinting that I was going to be in that industry. And the first one was actually even earlier. This is like 96, 95, while I was playing one of my many Sonic games on the Genesis or Mega Drive, depending where you're from, right? And Sonic 2 actually had a cheat code because we used to buy these little booklets with cheat codes, right? And the cheat code was the debug mode. And what it would do is it would actually turn Sonic into like a spawner for all of the sprites in the level. And I would just spend hours and just making my own levels using the Sonic debug mode. So now in retrospect, I was like, okay, that might have been the first hint that I liked in like environment art or level design or whatever it is, right? So Halo 2, when it came out, I was like, this was like 2002 or something, 2003. I was like 12, 13. So some people do, but I mean, it wasn't that easy to even know what they were using. Like, and the last moment that I remember that actually it was the first time I actually came across my mind the idea, oh, this would be a career. This would be something I would love to do. Was when Fable was about to release the first Fable, the original Fable. And there was a documentary in one of those magazines, the
Wow.
Xbox magazine at the time, that showcased a little bit like features of the game or whatever.
Just the
But
small things, yeah.
yeah, but it was very, very short. It wasn't like today's making offs and documentaries because it was
Yeah,
packed into a DVD, right? Everything had to be packed into a DVD, demos and videos and whatever
games and
content, like
everything else, yeah.
games, mods, whatever. So the documentary was like 15 minutes long, and I found the documentary on YouTube finally, which is this channel that dedicates itself to like history of Xbox or whatever. So the thing is, I looked at there was a part where they were showing like the characters getting fatter and getting skinnier and then getting buff, like muscle,
Blend
like
shapes.
getting a lot of muscle and all of that. And the guy was using some sort of 3D software that I didn't know what it was at the time. And I was like, wow, this is really a job. I would love to have that guy's job. You know what I mean? So, because it was Softimage, right? And now I know it because I look at it and I know what software that is. But it was Softimage. But at the time, I was like, so wow, this can really be something that you can do. But I wasn't a very particular good student. You know what I mean? And I always thought, oh, these people are like engineers that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
do this.
Actually, yeah. Now it's more like an artistic job.
Yeah,
And previously it was like just computer science, and you have to go to like something like computer engine. It was not even a computer engineering, like more like an electrical school, something like that,
yeah,
like
yeah.
faculty. Sorry. And I hear in the background that somebody is cutting a tree on Saturday, but I don't know if you hear
No.
it. That's okay. Uh, but mostly I do like so many flashbacks right now, and I'm stunned that I had so much memory and fun with those, like
Yeah.
Red Alert and
From what I
so.
understand, this was the time when Xbox was founded, the game studios, I mean. I think this was right around the time when the paradigm was shifting, like early 2000s, right?
Yeah,
Like because Halo just made Hollywood level of success, right? It was the first video game that actually grossed more than all the Hollywood films that year combined. It was the first one. It was Halo 2, right?
yeah,
So that at that point, people were starting to realize that this is kind of like making a movie in a sense. There are people that know how to operate cameras. There are people who know how to operate, how to make the VFX, how to make this, how to make that. But then there's artists behind the scenes creating everything that you see on screen, right? And so then it kind of peaked in the late 2000s in that sense, like the whole like looking at video games like movies kind of thing, you know? And now it's kind of balancing itself out. It's kind of like, okay, now we have artistic expression through gameplay, through game design, right? And that is also really cool because that's what it was back in the 90s, right? And the early 2000s. It was more like this is a game design product, regardless of the visuals, even though those are important. It's more like the gameplay. How does it make you feel? How does that? How innovative is that? In taking into account that the hardware was not, there were a lot of hardware limitations at the time, right? Nowadays, not so much that hardware limitations, more optimization. That's the problem. But but yeah,
yeah. Usually, right now we are more stuck. Like previously, it was like there is some like limitations, and you have to work with them.
yeah,
But it got to a point where there was no any like progress with the graphics, and the new graphics came out. And right
hmm
now, I think we're at the same position where we are just like have a small progress with the graphic
yeah,
cards, like small progress, and we have to have better shadows or motion
yeah.
blue. But mostly it's going to have a breakthrough in the next couple of years, maybe with cloud computing or
I
something
think,
that.
but I think those issues are not hardware issues. I think the graphics cards themselves are getting way more powerful than any game is taking advantage of. I think but that is my, that is just my take. It is what it is. Don't burn me at the stake for this. But but my understanding is that it's just that the games are not taking full advantage of the GPU because of the way they're optimized. It's not how well or how bad they're optimized. It's not about good and bad. It's the way they're optimized and what is the target for, right?
But
Because then
yeah,
again, it used to be in back in the day, let's say, that when you have like an exclusive console game, the game was optimized to perfection for that machine, right?
yeah,
But nowadays, there's so many, especially with PC gaming, and
yeah.
I'm a PC gamer, right? So I'm speaking against myself, but PC gaming is an issue because everyone has their own system, and then everyone has their own graphics card, and there might be people that have an old graphics card like a
And they want to
2060,
play the game,
and
yeah.
exactly. So I think that is the big issue because back in the 2000s, early 2000s, 90s, most of the big budget AAA games were exclusives, were console exclusives or PC exclusives. And some of the games were even graphics card exclusives. I
Y-
remember, I think
Good thing
was it
you
Quake?
mentioned PC exclusives, because they're not PC exclusives right now at the moment. Maybe for
Yeah.
Mac for some applications, but not for games. That's a good
Yeah.
thing that you mentioned.
Yeah, and I remember, I think was it Quake, one of the id Software's big games that would only run on a Voodoo FX 3D graphics card. It was like the only graphics card that would run it. I don't remember if it was Quake or not, but you needed to get that specific graphics card, not a more powerful graphics card, that specific graphics card because it was literally optimized to a T to that GPU, right? And that doesn't happen nowadays. So I think that that is just because they want, and I understand the point. The more people, the merrier, right? The more people you get to experience your product, the better. But at the same time, then you can't really have it both ways. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can, because you either get the most people on board and then you have to
or
sort of
nobody.
optimize for everyone, for Switch, for Xbox Series S, for GPUs, for the 2060, for even non-ray tracing GPUs, and then also for PS5, also for Xbox Series X, and also for, and then you get uh sort of like the same graphical level you got last gen. But yeah, you're right. The jump from last gen to this gen is not as big of a deal as, for example, the jump from the PS1 to PS2, or the jump from the Mega Drive to the Saturn era. You know, it's like the 3D, the advent of 3D, and changing from 2D to 3D. That was a big thing, right? But yeah,
Yeah,
there's
actually.
the tangent. We're going on tangents. I love this.
Yeah,
This is
so
great.
also when the Toy Story about the film industry as well, they just had a breakthrough with their like graphic cards and
Yeah,
having the chance to. But for those times, I think the content was much better because they focused more on the story and on, let's say, for example, if it is Toy Story, they focused more on an animation, not on rendering, because they didn't have so
yeah,
much like
yeah.
ability to do that. And also when I go back and play the old games, it's like Age of Empires is like
Oh yeah,
nostalgia. Like I wanted to
yeah.
play. And nowadays, I don't know, right now, like everything is more focused.
Sorry.
Bless you.
No,
Everything
thank you.
is focused more on, I will definitely say, graphics, visual effects. So which game will be more visually appealing? That
Yeah.
breakthrough, I think Cyberpunk, like God of War, they had the ability to do like an extra step forward.
Hmm.
So that's a good thing. And mostly now the video games are becoming to be like a movie. Like you play through the whole movie, like The Last of Us, I think they did.
Yeah.
And it also is like a blending because Netflix did also like a playable series with I think it's called with Black Mirror, where you
Hmm. Hmm.
choose the narrative of the story and there
Hmm.
is endless possibilities. But definitely maybe the TV gaming will come back on that side.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just also because there's so many. Well, back in the console wars days, right? Nintendo and Sega, and then
Yeah.
eventually, Sony and Sega, and then eventually Xbox and Sony, and now it goes on and on and on, right? But those days, it was more about trying to. It was also because of the console wars, because they were trying to outsell and outpower the other system, right? Even though that still happens today, obviously, but not to the same extent. Because again, most people nowadays they buy a system for the games, and back then, because we had no internet, we couldn't check out the games before we actually bought them or played them in a demo disc or something.
Yeah.
So
It was
they
a
would sell,
Russian
yeah,
roulette.
they would sell the system based on number one, its power. So they had to showcase its power. They had demo stations in every store. They had demos. They would send you demos. If you have a console, they would have to they would send you or sell for a cheaper price, like those packs, like cartridges with like 6 demos or something, you know. And so that's the way they had to show you, or just write magazine articles. That was super important. The magazines were super important. So now it's not like that, because nobody buys a console for the console. They buy the console for the games, right? Or they buy a PC for the games if their intent is just to play games, right? Because there's PC can do a lot of other things. But you know, So I think that is the big shift. It's also, it's not no longer, I think, about just technological prowess. It's now about gameplay, and it's about visual appeal more than actual graphics. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell that The Witcher 3, for example, is already a little dated, right? But every time I go back to that game, that first scene, that first area, like White Orchard, right? If you look at the visuals, even though they're graphically a little dated, not taking into account the new, like the ray tracing update and all of that, but the art style, the art direction is pretty much in timeless. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
timeless. Nostalgia.
You know,
Nostalgia.
yeah. It's not just nostalgia. It's like the actual. If you took that and you made a painting of those screenshots that I take all the time on Steam, it would be a painting. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if the graphics are too outdated. Here's the thing: we've seen a resurgence now of old graphics, and I don't mean pixel art, because there has been pixel art for a while now, since the whole indie boom in the late 2000s. But we've seen an actual appeal for old graphics. I don't mean pixel art again. I mean like really, really limited like graphics in a video game, right? In the indie scene, obviously, this is more of an indie thing. And again, if graphics were all that mattered, then how come Astrobot won Game of the Year, right? And why is Astrobot so good, right? Astrobot is good because the gameplay, right? and
Yeah,
and
and
how
also
fun it is.
Cuphead also that it was
Yeah,
a huge diversity of gaming. Like,
yeah.
and also wins game of the year, like not like, for example, Cuphead won so many copycats came also,
Mhm,
and it brought up the industry. So mostly, like, I'm very happy to see also that 2D is still like actually very good to be like a 2D artist, but you have to be like a very good one. And also,
mhm,
uh, because previously the 3D industry challenged the 2D, so mostly everybody that was bad at 2D were like erased, and the 2D good artists are still in the game. So as the industry progress, that means that if you don't have, for example, for our industry, I love it because if somebody is applying for a job or something like that in the studio for, let's say, for example, for a character artist, you just need to look at their portfolio. Yeah.
yeah,
So when you're working for some, when you're applying for some other job, you have to go to HR or something like that. But I I love this industry because it's much easier to see somebody if it is like trying to bullshit you, and that's why
mhm,
I'm always saying to our students like, if you don't have a good portfolio, you're not going to have a job. So
yeah,
mostly, if somebody can I become a character artist within 1.5 hours of
yeah,
investment for 4 years, yes, but at least
yeah.
4 years,
At least, yeah.
at least
So
4 years.
that's the thing. I've been trying to get into the industry for over 10 years. That was my my thing, right? Again, because we didn't talk about that, but I took me 10 years to get into the industry,
So
right?
how did you get to the 3D industry actually? What was your
Yeah,
process
we,
of it?
we, we didn't we didn't get to that part.
Yeah, yeah, I'm just waiting because we had a very good conversation
Oh, we can go on all day, man. Yeah,
because the conversation started in the beginning God created.
yeah. In the beginning, there was like, so, uh, yeah. So then again, like, I went through a very rough teenage years. You about the games that I played, Fable. I saw the documentary and all of that. I was still playing games, but I wasn't really particularly good at school. I was a very bad actually student. I wasn't failing. I failed a couple of classes, but it was just enough to pass to the next year. You know what I mean? Like, I was that type of
On the
student.
edge.
Yeah, on the edge, except for English. That was the only thing I never studied, never needed to study. So I was safe there. But and for some reason, astrophysics. And that was something that was unexplainable to my parents, right? Because here's the thing: the student people from that generation think of students that go to school, they think of they associate and make an equivalency. It's a fallacy as well, but an equivalency of intelligence based on grades, right? And that is a big problem because that type of school, that teaching method, works for a very specific type of student. A student that memorizes everything and, like reads a book to memorize it, then the next day forgot, right? And that's fine. That there are jobs where that is very good, but for me, it never worked. I was very bad at math. I was very bad at art. I hated drawing. Never drew as a kid, right? I did, but then I got traumatized by one teacher, and that's it. It's all
Yeah.
about the teachers, man. Not even
Killing the
kidding. Even,
passion. Killing the
even
passion.
math and physics and all that, it's all about the teacher. I just heard a podcast from Seamus Blackley. He was on a podcast. I don't remember the name of the podcast. The original creator of the Xbox, right? The guy's a theoretical physicist. He's a freaking genius, right? And he said the same thing. Is like he was always horrible at physics unless it was related to some project that he wanted to work on. You know what I mean? Like very practical thing. So I was always bad at that. And then eventually I jumped out. What do you say that? How do you say?
Drop out.
I dropped out of school, right? For a couple of years, I was basically doing nothing, right? A teenager. And then there was these new opportunities courses, the technical courses that are like state funded, and they're made so you can own a practice, own a skill, and then go to the job market. And they give you like the high school. This was like before high school. I wasn't even done with high school, right? So I took one just because I wasn't doing anything, and you'd get paid to go to school, basically. Not a lot, but they would pay your expenses at least, right? And I wasn't particularly rich at the time, if you know what I mean. So it was great. And then I went there, and there were like two courses that I was interested in. One was like sound design, and the other was 3D and 2D animation. And I took the 2D, 3D animation. Here's the funny thing, because there was no subject on physics. I hated physics so much, right? Now I wish I had learned that. I wish, because I love physics. I just don't know shit about it. Basically, I am horrible
So,
at it.
which year
But
was this?
this was like 2008, 2009, right?
The
And I enrolled in that course, and I was still very much, I don't give it, like I don't care about any of this, right? So I was still there just to be there. But, and I was about to be expelled because those courses, since they're state funded, they could expel you, right? If you're not doing your part or at least trying, right? And I was about to be expelled at the end of the first term, but by miracle, one of the classes that was supposed to be introduction to 3D was moved from the second term to the first term because one of the teachers from the first term got sick. So they had to switch the classes, right? So instead of introducing to Photoshop first, which was the idea, they introduced me to 3ds Max first.
wow.
And I remember this was like the last subject before Christmas break, and that was the moment when I was about to be expelled. I was told this years later, right? So that teacher, we still talk to this day. Like, by the way,
It's
that
your
teacher,
mentor. It's your mentor.
yeah, that teacher saw how much it was the first time that I ever stayed in a classroom after the class was done, right? And it was simple. It was just model a chair with like cylinders and a box, like the most simple thing you can think of, like the most simple exercise in 3D. But I was excited because now I looked at that screen, right, the UI and 3ds Max, and I remembered all of those things in the past where I was playing games and looking at magazines and watching documentaries and all of that, like since my childhood. All of a sudden it was like, oh, so this is how they do it, right? This is what you need to learn. Like, I need to learn this. This is the thing. And then all of a sudden, all of my grades, like math, Portuguese, like English, everything, history, art history. I'm obsessed with history now. Like, it all went to like perfect grades. Not even joking. It went from like, it's 0 to 20, right? The rating, the score system in Portugal, at least. So it went from like being 10s, 9s, 11s to like 20, 19, 20. That was it. right? From one day to the other. And so that teacher convinced the director to wait another term before deciding to expel me, because he thinks he saw uh, me interested in something for the first time.
Spark.
Yeah. So in the second term, all my grades just skyrocket. Everything, not just 3D, like literally everything, from art history to, we had a subject that we started. It was introduction to like ethics and philosophy and all of that. They try to introduce a lot of these things like humanities and stuff. All of those like almost perfect grades on everything, which was unprecedented for me.
It's
So
it's a good thing that every subject in school is connected maybe with 3D. Even so,
exactly,
history, like physics, math.
exactly.
Mm.
That's what I figured at the time. And I remember my colleagues going like, "Why do you care? You're here for 3D. Why you spend a whole weekend doing an entire research for like a freaking presentation for history, for art history?" I did that. I'm not even kidding. People would call me to go have drinks or whatever, and I would just stay at my father's house, whatever, with all of his encyclopedias and stuff, and Google and Wikipedia open and all of that, and just research throughout the night. Like 5 a.m., my dad was already asleep like long ago, and I was still like doing it. And then I made a presentation, and then I got like a perfect score. And people were like, "Yeah, but you're never going to really need that." And I always had this hunch that I would. You know what I mean? I always had this feeling that for some reason math and physics and history, art history particularly, painting, drawing, geometry, like we had descriptive geometry, what do you call that? Technical drawing, kind of like technical drawing. All of that would
Oh,
feed
technical,
in.
yeah, yeah, with the
i-
letters on the side, yeah.
Yeah. So I always had that feeling that all of those things would eventually feed into 3D. And all my colleagues thought, "Oh, he's just a nerd. He's crazy." But I was right. You know what I mean? So
So
yeah,
after finishing with your studies, so how actually did you get into the 3D industry?
yeah,
What was your first 3D job?
yeah. That leads perfectly into that, because here's the thing: Portugal doesn't really have an industry, right? Portugal is not. It does have some studios. That's the thing, and it has a lot of potential. It has a lot of talent. I know a lot of talent from Portugal, um, but there's no industry like there is in the UK, for example, or there is in the US mostly, and Japan and all of those countries, because there's not enough studios to be competitive, right? If there's a lot of studios, then they are competitive amongst themselves, right? For better salaries, for better job conditions, for better projects as well, right? They try to outcompete. It's like a healthy competition, right? And at the moment, and it always has been like this. Actually, it was even worse. There were like one or two studios, and that was it. Like AAA in a sense, doing any sort of
In a
AAA
sense,
work,
yeah.
right? Uh, so after that course, I took an internship at a studio at the time near my place that was being outsourced to work on the World Rally Championship game for the PS3, right? The WRC,
Wow.
right? WRC 3 at the time. And so I did that internship. I was doing the optimization. So optimization like LODs, like the boring stuff that nobody likes to do, I actually liked to
UVs.
do. So LODs, reducing geometry, and then basically retaining the UV shells and all of that. Shaders in Unreal at the time, Unreal Engine 3, right?
Wow.
Um, so all of that stuff I was doing, and I remember basically then getting hired for like another month or something for more optimization. But I wanted to go to college. I wanted, because in my mind, my innocent mind, I thought going to college it was the way to go, because then I would study more 3D. I would keep going like this. Problem is the college I went to was like shit, man. You have no idea. I almost quit the entire industry there, like, because I thought if this is like the best I can do education wise, because I always knew about like Gnomon and Escape at the time. They were the two big, you
Yeah.
know, schools,
Schools,
but they
yeah.
were like crazy expensive. Like
They're still
it's
crazy expensive.
yeah, because it's like
If
American in America. That's not. it is the norm. Let's say it's still expensive, but it is the norm to get like student loans and all of that.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that. It was like, and even if I could, I was too intimidated by the fact of, going to this thing in Hollywood and then applying for a loan and all of that. You know what I mean? So, but it was always in the back of my mind because they were in the news all everywhere in the magazines, 3D World, 3D Artist, which sadly just collapsed. Basically, they stopped. They went out of print the other day, the 3D World magazine,
They
unfortunately.
stopped.
But yeah, they went out of print. The last issue was the ZBrush for iPad issue, actually.
Wow, that's very.
That was, yeah,
That's a couple of months ago.
yeah, that was very recent. I was very sad, and I still am, because that thing, together with that course that I was taking, it was the magazines, man. I would buy 3D World or 3D Artist religiously every month, so I could read it, right? And just reading through it, that's how I found out about ZBrush. That's how I found out about game ready practices and current industry practices, because even though you're taking a course in a country where no one really in the industry can teach you, right? Because there is no industry, so no one really could teach me industry standard practices, right? Which is important. So that was a big problem, because at the time it wasn't that common to have
But
online
at the
courses and all of
time,
that.
it's still the same time as now. We had a conversation a few weeks ago, uh, and the problem is even so with the 3D magazine is like maybe the US has the industry, but it really doesn't. Like California does, but the whole
Yeah,
states, like until like New York, something like that, they don't have anything like
no,
any studios or something. Even
no. New
so,
York does have a few, but not at the same level as
it's
California or
it's
Texas now, actually.
yeah, even so, if you see Europe as a state, it has, but if you see it as like a separate, it
Hmm.
doesn't have anything. So it's very difficult for this industry because most like people when they get into the industry sees that they have so many like games coming out, but the artists are very few. Like maybe for
Yeah,
some games, like there is like one team of 7 people are producing 100 200 games
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
mobile,
No, that is
and
true.
for the PC, like maybe like The Last of Us, Redemption, God of War, they have much more, like thousands people working on those games, but it's very very rare to see like an artist, and that's why there is no community that you mentioned. So there is no
Yeah,
community in that is keeping us together and expanding us. So we
yeah.
had that conversation previously.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that is a big problem, but at the same time, you need to have someone in a classroom, because that's the problem with having so many courses available. Every university nowadays has a freaking video game course. Like even in
That's true.
Portugal.
That's
That's like there's like 20 just in my hometown alone. It's crazy. Then you think, okay, let's say there's like 10 students, which there's more, but let's say there's 10 students for those 20 courses. And so that's already 200 students per year that you're outpouring, right? So 200 people getting into the industry every year is not going to cut it. I would say at least like a fourth of them are never going to be in this industry, because what will happen is if there's a studio that needs to hire someone from those 20 schools, they're going to look for the best ones, because they're not going to hire 200 people. Just that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? They're going to hire maybe 10, like, and out of those 10, they need to pick, like, they're going to pick objectively. They're going to pick on merit, like who's has the best portfolio, right? Who
It
has the
has the
best?
best portfolio. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the thing. The problem with those universities, that there's a lot of courses, and since there's so many courses, there's not enough teachers as well, like you said, because it is a small industry, even though it looks like it's big, because everyone plays games, everyone watches movies, everyone buys merch and buys collectibles from some series, some anime, some whatever that was produced by someone like us, right? So uh that looks like it's big, but actually it is very small. There's not a lot of people working in the industry. There's, even if you say there's like 100,000 people, that's nothing. compared to other industries, right?
Yeah, and even
Uh,
so, it's the largest industry like in income, like
Yeah,
trillions of dollars.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's not
Exactly.
something like a small industry, so it's one of the
Yeah.
biggest in the world. Like it's your
Per capita, right? Per capita is one of the most rich,
like
the richest industries in the world,
it's
right?
more common to play a video game than to buy a bread. So,
Yeah. If the industry itself was a company, a country, sorry, its GDP per capita would be the richest in the world,
yeah,
for sure. Like, how many inhabitants does this industry have? Maybe 100,000, let's say, right? There's definitely not a million, right? But it's in between that range, so which is not a lot.
with the
So if you
film
think
industry.
about how much money does it make every year, and then divide that by 100,000 people, that gross product per person is way higher than like the oil industry, or you know what I mean, like, or the health industry or whatever it is, right?
That's true.
Pharmaceuticals and whatever, because there's so much more people working on those industries than there is in games of VFX or collectibles, toys. You know, everyone buys toys. Someone made those toys. You know what I mean? Some ZBrush artist somewhere in somewhere around the world. It doesn't need to be in the US or whatever. Somewhere around the world made the toy that you as a kid played or your kids played, right? So
So
it doesn't.
when you finish with the internship,
Yeah,
like after
I went
that
to
it.
college. I went to college. It
Oh
was,
wow.
yeah. So then I stopped, and then I went to college, and for a
And you
year I
have.
hated myself, and then I switched because I came to the conclusion that there were no video game, like actual good video game courses in Portugal. So I was like, if I need to study something that is going to be useful eventually, might as well just study art, right?
Yeah,
So
that's a good decision.
I went to, like, because it was far from home, so I decided to go back home, but enroll in like one of the most expensive schools in the country, because in essence I was spending the same on that other school because I was living far from home. I had to pay rent, I had to pay all these things. So I just went back to my mom's place and studied just art basically. And then I got introduced to figure drawing, to classical drawing, from Porto Atelier, which is like a school modeled um, in the vein of Grand Central Atelier, the French schools of the 19th century, and all of that. And and I got introduced to drawing for the first time as an objective thing, like as something that is learnable, like step by step. You know what I mean? And that never happened before. I was always frustrated with drawing. Never drew as a kid. Uh, So learning that made me obsessed with drawing and fine art and art history, like I was before. But now it was like, oh, this is why I needed to study art history, so I could learn how to draw from the old masters, right? And then after that, I was like, but how does this relate to 3D? There was like that struggle within my mind, like I really want to do 3D, but there's no industry. And it feels like when I'm doing figure drawing, it's kind of like not the same part of my brain that's active. You know what I mean? So uh, for years, I didn't do 3D. I didn't learn 3D. I was learning it, but like passively, right? Like every now and then I would watch a tutorial and, do that, whatever. But I was drawing like a maniac. I was drawing like 30 hours a week, easy, easy. And then taking classes in college, and then also studying. There were a lot of theoretical courses like philosophy, aesthetics, psychology, and all of that in my university. So it was a lot, and I eventually burned out in 2015, right? Because I was just working nonstop, and then my dad got sick, and all of that combined, it was like burned out. 2015, right? So what ended up happening was I went through a period when I split the course in two. I left my final project for like a fourth year instead of 3 year. And during that period, I was trying to refine myself in 3D, right? And when I did that, eventually it led me to small little gigs, like as a freelancer. Like I
Yeah.
did freelancing for like industrial manufacturing, industrial design. I worked with Creo PTC, which is like a technical drawing kind of like Rhino, right? It's a CAD
Yeah.
software. And then I did a little bit of restoration, like old statue restoration. This was like the first time where I actually did something in ZBrush professionally. But it was, I mean, I knew Dynamesh, and that was it. I knew Dynamesh and clay buildup brush and standard brush. That was it. That was the amount of knowledge I had in ZBrush. This was like 2017, 2018. And eventually I went back to that old school where I graduated first in 3D animation just to visit the teachers and all of that. And all of a sudden they wanted someone to teach 3D because the teacher had left or whatever. Not the one that taught me, but another teacher that they had hired that was teaching Maya had left. So they wanted someone to teach. And I was out of a job. I had freelance gigs, but like you need more than that, right? Especially in Portugal, man, with the taxes and all of that.
Yeah, and also
But
I hate
yeah,
freelancing because
yeah,
you cannot show that stupid portfolio.
yeah, exactly. So, mm, sorry, my throat is a little dry.
Yeah.
Uh, so I accepted that job and I started teaching. But I was still very much like I'm a fine artist. I'm going to be a fine artist, right? I was still drawing from the live model at least 3 times a week, long pose, shorter pose, doing portraits, copying from the old masters, doing cast drawings, drawing architecture, drawing a bunch of stuff, right? Like doing a classical training, right? For 8 years, right? And I did that. And eventually, when I was teaching, I got my interest spark, like the spark that I used to have in 3D back because I started teaching. I forced myself to not be the teacher that I hated while I was a student. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to be the guy that went there and just taught some shit and then tell them to do the work and then not have that experience. Because that was the worst thing. If I felt like I was being taught by someone that didn't even know as much as I did, right? That was the worst feeling ever as a student. Like this guy is just like me, but he got the job for some reason, and now he tells me what to do. You know what I mean? There's
But
no
I
credibility,
I
right?
respect more that somebody if he doesn't have like more knowledge, like he's a entry level junior. I would love to work with him because he will wants to give me the 100% of his
Yeah,
attention and his need like knowledge. But when I'm like learning from somebody that is like a renewed artist, he doesn't have the time for me and I'm too
yeah,
boring for
yeah.
him. So
Mm.
eventually you were in the good spot to give everything that you had in yourself for them. So I respect you more for that, even.
Basically, I decided to use teaching as a way to learn, which is something that a lot of people miss. It's like, okay, what do they need to get into the industry? And I was like, always imposter syndrome back in my head. But who the heck are you to be teaching them that? Right. But then I was like, they really, really need to know this because they need to get into the industry. And if they need a job after this and they come to me and go like, oh, how do I do this? Like you see students come to you and ask you about jobs, about all of that because their life kind of depends on it. And then I always felt like I had this moral duty to help them. You know what I mean? So I was like, if I have to help them, then first I need to learn this to the T. Like I need to master freaking Maya. I need to master ZBrush. I need to master. Obviously, that then COVID hit, and this was all like a sequence of of the universe kind of conspired for that to happen, and you'll see why. So I was teaching, I was feeling the imposter syndrome, like I still do, everyone does, right? Going like, oh, you're still who are you to teach this? And I had a class that I had to structure, And I could just easily just say, oh, my class is going to be like Maya, because that was the software I was comfortable with. And that's it. Just teach Maya. That's it. Don't teach anything about games. Just teach them how to do like a freaking extrude and, how to retopo, maybe. That's really not
Maybe.
necessary. You know what I mean? Like I could just teach them the software and teach them to be a button pusher in Maya. You know what I mean?
Cleaning green
Or
screen.
or I could learn Substance, or I could learn ZBrush and then teach them, right? So that was my mindset. It was like, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden, everything that I wanted to go back to, like THU, that event that I used to go, and then I had that burnout in like 2016, 2015, and I stopped going. Uh, and then, but at the same time, THU announced that it would be back in the year after. This was like 2021. It was like a year after the COVID, like the lockdown, right? And also, no one was suddenly online. Every single subject they had physically on the Insight, because they have a full-time course that's on site only, everything was online, including advanced digital sculpting in ZBrush, which was the class I took. I knew, again, I knew Dynamesh and maybe clay buildup, and that was it.
Maybe.
And I decided to go for the most advanced class in the Gnomon curriculum, basically in ZBrush. And I did ask them. I said, "Oh, hey, I know how to do this. Is that enough?" Or like, and they said it depends on how much time you have for the class. It always depends on how much you give, right? Any
Yeah.
class, right? So and that was, I think, a conspiracy, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn ZBrush because they need to know ZBrush. My students need to know ZBrush, so I'm gonna learn ZBrush, and I'm gonna learn Substance because my students need to learn Substance. I knew the workflows because I had been reading 3D World nonstop. I've been watching tutorials. I've been doing a few things on my own, but never really taking that step into the industry, because I always had this in the back of my mind, like it's impossible for me. I cannot do it. It's impossible. Like I live in a country with no industry. I have no actual education in 3D, like actual, you know, I had art education, right? And and I thought that was a thing. And I have no actual portfolio, right? And why even do a portfolio if you're not going to get a job? It's guaranteed that it will be very hard for you to get a job. Nowadays, it's different. With COVID, things changed, right? But so I enrolled in that class, and that was Paul. That was where I met Paul. It was my teacher right there. And so no one better to teach you ZBrush than Paul Gabry from ZBrush, right? So the moment I realized I knew there was this Paul that was going to teach me, and when I realized it was Pixelogic's Paul, I was like, oh wow, okay. So that is a thing. It was all hard surface for like 12 weeks, and for 12 weeks I literally did absolutely nothing else other than study or do my piece for that course, which was a Gundam. By the way, I got freaking obsessed with Gundam thanks to that guy. Like so, thank you, Paul. But so I basically was doing every spare time I had was dedicated to learning ZBrush. I'm talking 16 hours a day, easy, right? And whenever I had to teach a class, because in COVID we still taught like online and stuff, that's when I stopped doing ZBrush, and then I would go back to doing ZBrush, like right after teaching the class, right? So, and after that, I decided to take a substance course as well at CGMA, like it was environment art, and I started to get interested in environment art because I always loved Unreal. I was into Unreal Engine 3, UDK was still a big thing, and then Unreal Engine 4. At that time, it was Unreal Engine 4 already, uh, and and I decided, okay, let me go back to like environment art so I can start tinkering again with Unreal, and I started tinkering again with Unreal, and then this is like a chain reaction. You see this? So I went to THU, and there were two companies that were already interested in me, and I wasn't even done. I wanted to keep going. You know what I mean? So because it was like two small little courses, small in a sense, uh, and there were already it was Frontier Developments and oh yeah, Cloud Imperium. So both of those, right? And I was for the first time, I remember it didn't amount to anything. I didn't get the job, but the fact that a company showed interest just because I was dedicated to something for the sheer purpose of liking that subject, right? And not thinking, oh, I need to get a job. Because here's the thing, I had accepted that I would never get a job in the industry. So I was doing it for the sheer fun, for how much I loved to work in a 3D software, how much I loved a video game engine. You know what I mean? So that goes back to the other question where you were asking about um, uh, people get worried that they're not going to have a job at the end of the course. I accepted that I wasn't going to get a job. And then what happened was at THU, those two companies showed interest, not because of my portfolio, but portfolio was there. It showed potential, but it was also the attitude, right? It's not just a portfolio though, because you can be a massive, great artist, but you can also be a massive asshole and nobody wants to work with you,
The portfolio
right?
is essential, but the second one is also something that can can push you way back or way further in in your career, because it's something that we are part of our culture. I don't know what they're doing at some studios. I don't want to name them, but mostly, if you're an asshole, you can go to Ubisoft, do one project, and leave the studio. But definitely, if you're working with a very good team, you have to have your positive
Yeah,
attitude there.
yeah, of course. So the moment that I had that approval stamp, let's say, it felt like my world just changed, right? It felt like, okay, wait, this is really a possibility. This is something that could happen, right? I could actually get a job in the industry. It's not like an impossible thing, right? Because to me, even though I was a teacher and even though I was taking classes from like Paul Gabry and I was taking classes from Michael Pavlovich, from Ben Keeling, from all these people, I still hadn't convinced myself that I was possible. You know what I mean? So when I did, I went full on 100%, 200% all in. So I quit my jobs as a teacher, unfortunately, because I actually liked teaching. And I always liked my colleagues as a teacher. And I still, again, keep in touch with a lot of them to this day. Uh, so I basically decided I'm going to go all in. And there was a master's degree at Escape Studios at the time. And they were all about Unreal. There was a game art course that was all Unreal, basically. Everything else was to feed Unreal. Basically, they wanted to teach Unreal, and it was a master's degree. So at the same time, if anything, it didn't work out. Let's say I still have a master's degree from the UK where I can fall back into and go back into teaching. That was basically the safe net mentality,
Save that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this because I know even though it's a master's degree, it's like a formal university thing. It is one of the like the top 10 like schools that like in it is an industry standard school, let's say, like industry approved school, one of the industry approved schools. So and that was enough for me, right? So I did that, and then for a whole year, nonstop. I even quit drawing. I even stopped going to draw, like to the atelier. That was when people around me knew that I might either I could either be crazy, or I was going insane, basically, or I was actually gonna do something radical and change my life, right? So when I studied there for 1 year, I literally saw no one. I was like full on. I wake up, eat, take a dump, and go back into my computer and work, right? So for a whole year, that was still the portfolio that is there, an art station. That was Escape Studios. I wasn't. It was my portfolio, and it's except for the group project, right? It was where there was a lot of people involved, but it was my portfolio. But it was the result of like that dedication, right? So that at that point, I was very much convinced that I want. This is 1 year. I have 1 year, and the amount of time and effort I put into this year is going to dictate how successful I will be
in the future.
after.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I dedicated a year into that. And I literally, man, if I wasn't doing anything in Unreal and video games or whatever, I was watching something to teach me something new, right? So I was always like, my brain was always in that mentality. What ended up happening though was that in my final project, and most people don't know this, I had a burnout during my final project, right? So that final project is like the open world landscape. Technically, I ambitioned it to be bigger, but it was still big enough to earn me like the distinction grade in my master's and all of that. And I had like a few jobs lined up. Again, I won't mention anyone, but because I know that it wasn't their fault. Like the people that I met that wanted to hire me, genuinely wanted to hire me, you know? But then that's exactly when the video game industry started laying off people. It was right around that time, 2023, right? We're starting to that the whole like Hollywood crisis with the strikes and all of that started right around that time. And also the video game industry started the COVID burst, the bubble started bursting, right? The whole like over hiring during COVID and all of that, and then the acquisitions and all of that happened right after I got out of my master's degree, right? And so all the jobs that I had lined up with dream studios that I always wanted to work for their IP, like literally since the start. I'm talking like Fable, man. I'm talking about like all of those games that growing up made me a 3D artist. All of a sudden, those jobs are no longer there because the industry is kind of like not in the same place anymore. And again, I'm not throwing stones at anyone because it is what it is. Like the industry has ups and downs, it's normal. And the people that were involved in that process,
just
it's not
just
their fault,
to make
right?
it clear that every industry was up and down
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Because when
yeah,
somebody like the game industry is right down right in at the moment, but every industry is down at the moment. So let's
yeah,
say it, the economy was down.
yeah. It's the economy, but there's always a niche market. So nowadays it's indie studios in the
Yeah,
West. Indie studios, double A games are making a comeback, fortunately, because some of the greatest IPs that were ever created were created from a double A perspective. BioWare was a double A studio, right?
that's
At
really
one
good.
point. You know what I mean? They were actually an indie studio at one point, right? So uh, that is where the creativity for those things happen. And I think that's the future, to be honest. But that's a separate conversation. So I ended up and started throwing myself at jobs like crazy, because there was like this. I dedicated this whole time to this, right? And now all of a sudden it's slipping through my fingers. And then you start to think, okay, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I decided that year, how much dedication I did would condition the fact that I got a job or not. If I didn't get a job, then that means I suck. That means I suck, right? So that's the big problem. I went on that downward spiral, and I think that is when you realize that the people you've met are more important, like the people themselves, not are more important than the companies, and more important than the 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 skills, exact skills that you have or whatever, or type of job that you want to get into, or character artist, environment artist, technical art. That doesn't really matter as much as who you know. And I'm not talking about, oh, some connections and stuff. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, like, there are people, friend of mine from Outfit 7, Tamara, friend of mine from Digital Void, Boyan, Spirovsky it was a guy that did a lot, helped me out on a lot of like art tests and all of that. And my teacher, Chris Avigny, uh,
You
and
mentioned so
Matt,
many familiar
yeah,
names.
Matt Dunlop from Frontier at the time. Now he's not at Frontier, he's at Space Ape Games. But those people Lou Arnold is now at Sumo. He was also one of those people at a Frontier that helped me out. But the most important person of all for me during that period was definitely Paul Gabry. Paul Gabry jumped on the calls with me when I was feeling like quitting. Like my burnout was like I was on the ground, man. Like I was, down in the dirt. Like like I was in a very, very bad place. And the guy who was technically just my teacher at Nomon, and then I did do a mentorship with him when he opened up his Sculpt Corner class and all of that. The guy took the time to jump on a call with me and help me through those issues multiple times, not just one time, right? And Paul is literally the reason that I'm still in the industry. Obviously, I work with him now, but that's besides the point. If I didn't, I would still be saying this because the guy is really genuinely a good person, and he did a lot more than a lot of other people did in the industry for me, and I'll forever be grateful. I'm getting emotional, man, already. Come on, but but it is true. Like out of all those people, there are a lot of people that helped me. Paul was definitely like the goat there, right? He was the goat, right? And so he went. There was a point where he went to London on a business trip, and he told me, "Hey, you're close." Because he's American, so he's actually Canadian. But to him, like going from Portugal to the UK, that's like that's like a bus.
A
That's
bus
right,
trip, yeah.
because
For us, is like
like the US is like big, right? So and he was like, "Oh, you're close. You should come by and let's have a drink or something." And I'm like, "Sure." I'm out of cash. I have no money. I am here having no freaking money, and he wants me to go to London. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go." I stayed at a friend's place, like one of my friends from Escape. I stayed at his parents' house, actually. Met his parents, and I all for the sole purpose of going to the pub after Paul was done with his business to meet people in the industry. He just wanted to introduce me to people. And so I already knew a lot of people in the industry, not a lot like Paul does. Like Paul knows the entire industry. Like everyone knows who Paul is, basically. I was surprised by that when I actually went to London. And then I met all of these people, and I started thinking, like, why is he doing this? Like, why is he, you know what I mean? Like, because there's no, I wasn't particularly in a good place, and the imposter syndrome was through the roof, man. I was like, why me? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? There's so many other people with much more talent than me, and here I was meeting like the freaking director of ILM. You know what I mean? Like, what the heck is this? Like, what's going on? So, uh, so I went to London, and nothing came out of fruition, and then nothing came out of that, in a sense that because the industry there was still strikes going on. I had a friend that I stayed at his parents' house. He was an Unreal Engine technical artist, and he was at a company which I won't name, and he was working in Unreal. It was working on film, VFX, actual VFX, like for film, right? Hollywood. And then the writers' strikes happened again, and he immediately got laid off. He didn't get laid off. He got on a pause. He went home for a pause, unpaid pause, which is basically
laying off.
another way of saying you're fired without saying you're fired. You know what I mean? You're like on unpaid leave indefinitely. You know?
Independent.
So yeah, so he was doing job interviews and all of that. And I remember because he started at that company when I went to London to meet him, to meet Paul and meet. That's where I met Paul for the first time in person, actually. And I met Ian Robinson as well. I met the whole ZBrush team there. It was like the first time I met them, right? So I met Michael and Kyle and Grace, all of those people that are behind the scenes, doing a lot of the good work on ZBrush Live and all of those things, ZBrush Summit. And so after that, I got a job as a freelancer for a couple of projects, animation projects in Unreal. I was an Unreal environment technical artist, and I worked there for like 3 to 4 months, 3 months, 4 months actually, around that time. And I was doing a little bit of everything because it's a small studio, right? But I was mostly a technical artist. I was doing materials, procedural
Everything.
systems
Yeah.
within the material. I was establishing pipelines for the other environment artists. I was doing pipeline tutorials, let's say, for
It
them.
was a good. It was a good thing that you were not working on site because you were definitely going to clean something,
What do you mean?
like
The
cleaning the studio or something like that. The indie stuff.
well,
It's
here's
like
the
a
thing.
team
They came,
effort.
yeah, because they didn't have that experience. They were traditionally an animation studio, working on offline rendering stuff, with Arnold and like they had to wait to render, right? That's my point,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden Unreal is this big thing, and now everyone does Unreal, and virtual production is a big thing. And they wanted to do an animation series, their own IP, based and work with Unreal. So they hired me. They hired a technical artist. That guy was the main. It was the lead technical artist at that project, right? And I was working very closely with him, the art director, and the senior environment artist, which was there weren't a lot of environment artists, but I was one of them. But then I started handling the whole pipeline thing. So basically, optimization, how things are done for Unreal for real time, like RGB mask workflows, for example. That was absolutely new to them. They never worked like that. They always worked with UDIMs, and they don't care about like textile density in the sense, because like you have a shot, right? If it looks good from that angle, then that's fine. That's all you need to
You
you
need to
really
do.
need to. Yeah, but in real time, in Unreal, the point of Unreal is that you can, even for a linear media like a TV series, is that you can iterate and you can change something on the fly. Like you can go, oh, I don't like this shot, maybe I want to move it over there, and now all of a sudden the blurry texture that's behind the character is going to be noticeable, right? So you can't really model like you do in film. You can't texture like you do in film. You can UV like you do in film, even though you're doing a film. You have to work with game workflows, right? You have to make the model look good from every angle, like a first person shooter. Like, right, if a model, you're going to look up close and you're going to be far away. So, uh, I was doing that for a while, and then I started streaming on ZBrush Live because when I met the team
Nice.
in London, they saw my portfolio and all that, and they saw that it was very uncommon. Not a lot of people that are environment artists are like ZBrush fans. You know what I mean? Like there are some studios actually that use ZBrush for uh, environment art a lot, but
Yeah.
it's not
Rocks.
really when people get into ZBrush, then they tend to think, oh, it's characters. That's what you do. You do
Yeah.
characters.
Decals and so many
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. So I was doing all of that. I was doing atlases. I was doing trim sheets. I was doing all the things that I could do in ZBrush. I would do in ZBrush instead of other software, right? Even Retopo, right, and stuff like that. So the thing is, they saw that and they were like, "Oh, would you like to stream for ZBrush Live? Because we have a lot of character artists. We don't have environment artists on ZBrush Live." And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And then I started doing that as well, doing that freelancing. When that freelance job ended, let's just say it didn't end in the best of terms. There were a few things they did that I will not say because it will. Well, I could because they were kind of assholes to me, but whatever. But I'm not. So it wasn't the best. We didn't part ways in the best of terms, let's say, and legally speaking as well. So I went back to being like just a ZBrush Live artist and feeling like shit. And then the ZBrush Summit happened, and I was like, okay, I have this money from this job that I did. I'm just gonna go to the ZBrush Summit, and that's gonna be all in. If I get a job, I'm gonna enroll in the recruitment sessions with like Blizzard and all of that. If I get a job, that's great. If I don't, I go back to teaching. It was like my last straw, right? So I went to the ZBrush Summit, and oh, by the way, in the meantime, there was a job opening at Maxon, and I saw that and I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply to this, even though it's not really. I'm not doing like I'm not in a game studio or whatever, but I'm gonna apply because this sounds cool. Because you interact with a lot of studios, you interact with a lot of industries. You have to work with these studios actually to build their pipelines to help them come up with new workflows more optimized for their particular needs and all of that. So you're actually doing stuff in the industry, but then you're also doing it in multiple industries, and you're also part of that rock and roll indie band that's called the ZBrush team, right? So, so that's pretty cool. So I always thought, okay, I'm apply for this. I applied. I did the initial interview and all that. And then when the ZBrush Summit happened, this is very, very interesting. It was really very weird coincidence. When the ZBrush Summit happened, I was complaining to a friend about an art test that I had with a company that was handled like shit by them. And I was in the phone, and then suddenly I got a call, and I put my friend on hold. And then I take it, and it was from Germany, and it was from Maxon, and telling me that I got a job. And I'm like, okay, okay, that is cool. And I was there at the summit, and then the HR was like, oh, when can you sign this? And I'm like, listen, I'm at one of your studios. Like, I'm here, but I'm in LA and I'm at the summit, and I'll have to take a look at it and then sign it right when I got back. So when I got back, I was officially going to start at Maxon the next year, which was 2024, right? Which was last year now. So that's how I technically how I got in the industry. That's a long answer to that. So
Yeah, but
I
this
know.
is the process that is the good thing, but it's a good thing that you stick to your decisions, and no matter what happens, you work on something that you like. It's a very crucial and good advice to hear somebody that is starting out into the industry, because mostly it's like they need reassurance that they will get the job that they want,
Yeah.
and it's a good thing to share the things that they need encouragement, because it's like when somebody is asking me like will I have a job in 4 years, it's like it's it's starting
There's no
to,
way you can predict that.
yeah, it's starting to annoy me, because everybody does want to get that, and also it's one thing to uh, it's a process, like an industry standard process, where you need to have a portfolio. In order to have a good portfolio, you need to learn that pipeline. Like it's not just the pipeline, it has the pipeline will lead you to a good portfolio. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's also your decisions that will get you the job, because if you have a good portfolio and just wait for an opportunity, it will not happen.
Yeah. Give me a second. You're gonna cut this part. Yeah, it's allergies though.
Yeah,
It's
don't worry.
a little dusty. This wasn't cleaned yesterday because I was working here late, and the cleaning people in the office skipped this room. So yeah, but whatever. So yeah, so that was the my path was a little zigzag around the issue. I went all around the world just to get back to, you know what I mean? So it was a very more longer than normal. It's not normal, right? So I just took the long way around. Uh, but nowadays, especially with the whole like online courses and all of that, it's so easy to get proper training, proper teaching. You know what I mean? Like that was the big problem for me when I started after that initial technical course at IPTA. Um, it was like, where do I learn this stuff? Can I get an industry, a teacher that is from the industry? You know what I mean? That can teach me these things. I couldn't find any. The only option was either to fly to London or fly to LA. That was it,
Yeah, there was
because
not
there was the hubs, right? And it wasn't like games particularly, right? Like games wasn't even
invented.
Escape didn't have a games course at that time. You know, like
But you
Escape didn't. They had VFX and compositing. That was it. 3D for VFX and compositing. because that was all the industry needed at
Nuke.
the time. Yeah, it was Nuke and then Maya, a lot of Maya.
Yeah.
And because that was what the industry, the studios in London, which are mostly VFX studios at the time,
Are based
needed.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about like the school provides the manpower for the needs of the studio. So if the studio needs this, then obviously the schools need to cater to that, and catering to that means teaching students to be up to par so they can get that job. So then the studio is satisfied, the school is satisfied, and the students are satisfied, right?
Everybody.
So everybody wins, right? And so no one was the same. They had a few like Unreal courses and all that, but it was mostly for VFX. And but no one was actually the only one that was doing, because it was more about the artistry. It was always more about the artistry, right? It wasn't really how to do this, right? It was more like, okay, let's look at your portfolio, and then your portfolio had to showcase some artistic prowess. If it didn't, and I'm talking, they didn't want to see 3D in your portfolio, because that's what they were going to teach you. So they wanted to see drawing, they wanted to see architectural drawing, photography, graphic design, anything outside of 3D that shows that you have any sort of like sense of aesthetics and eye for composition. Or if you didn't have that, no worries. They had like the foundational year, which was like drawing, color theory, oil painting, photography, filmmaking, theory of animation, practice of animation, gesture drawing, live model drawings. Like it
And
was drawing, 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 drawing,
and
right?
they're just and also they're starting to die out as well, those classes,
Yeah.
because mostly they wanted to everybody wants to get a 3D like degree or the course. They really just want to jump,
Hmm.
and afterwards they're saying I'm not good at 3D, but actually they're just using generators like in Substance and
Yeah.
some noise alphas from ZBrush, and at the beginning it looks good, but it doesn't have a consistency to get better, so they're stuck at those levels for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's people realize late, way later than it should be, that training in classical drawing is absolutely important for any kind of artist, regardless of what you do. If it's 3D, it's 3D. If you're a sculptor, obviously. If you're
Obvious.
an oil painter, even more obvious. But if you're also an architect, also if you're a freaking photographer. I remember I took photography classes and I did an exhibition in photography a few years ago. Like, and everyone was praising my composition. I was never really taught photography composition, but I was taught composition via drawing. You know what I mean? Like it's composition still. Everything is composition basically, and drawing is composition. That's what it is, right? Disegno means design. Disegno means drawing as well. So it comes from the same root word in Latin. It's design and design of shapes. That's what it is, right? And at the end of the day, even when you're a 3D artist, that's what you're doing. You're designing shapes. You're designing
Yeah,
shapes on a screen
that's true.
or
That's
shapes
true.
on a canvas. It doesn't matter. Like at every frame in a video game, there's a combination of shapes happening, right? And that's art direction, right? But it's still drawing. You know what I mean? Even to its more core base level, because we can talk about how drawing improves your anatomy, how drawing improves your understanding of gesture, your understanding of design of a
Layout.
creature, layout, or whatever. But even if you strip all of those things from drawing, you go to the core of what drawing is. It's just an assembly of shapes, of abstract shapes that make something coherent that is not abstract. It means something in your brain, and then that might evoke some feelings or whatever when you're looking at that picture, right? So it's the same thing in 3D, in film, in whatever. The director of photography is basically a person that does that. It's just someone behind the scenes that looks at a picture film, a picture frame, film frame, Jesus, a film frame, and goes like, I don't like this shape of this window or whatever. Or the camera angle should change to make this shape more angular or whatever. You know what I mean? So someone that is drawing with a camera, basically,
That's
but
true.
it's still drawing. You know what I mean? So everything is drawing,
So
in a sense.
it's a process of everything. So I'm very glad that you shared that. But I wanted to ask you what's in the future for you, because now it's a step that it will lead you towards because it's the time is changing. So my question is like, what's the next step for you that will lead you
So
to your success in the next 3 or 4 years?
so again, like I think my next step is to actually come to terms that I need to be able to do stuff that I love as well as stuff that is for a job, right? So, because sometimes you do get a job like I did, and it's very easy to lose track of yourself. You know what I mean? Like it's very easy to be okay. There's a balance between work life, obviously, that needs to be put in place. I have spent too many years neglecting that, and now it's very hard to get back to a healthy kind of balance. You know, so that is the thing that I'm gonna try to do, and then obviously I want to get back into doing a lot more personal work as well. I want to do, and that might involve uh, uh, ZBrush and 3D and sculpting, obviously, but it might also be just game development, like pure game development. You know what I mean? Like actually making small little games, and it's not like, oh, I want to break out in the industry and uh and
It's
freaking
something
make
for yourself.
millions.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like a hobby in a sense. I want to make games that I would play myself. You know what I mean? Like that's what I want to do. And if I might publish them, might not, it doesn't matter. You know, it's more like if you're a Hollywood movie maker, like George Lucas was, right, a director, and then you're like, oh, but I'm actually an indie filmmaker because he was an indie filmmaker, and he came from indie films like American Graffiti and all of that, and then after he sold Star Wars, he was like, bye. I'm out making indie movies again. That's what he did. No, I'm not saying that I'm George Lucas, not at all. But and not nor am I saying that I have his bank account, right? But but it's the same thing. There comes a point when even though you love your own little Star Wars, even though I love my work and then my job as at Maxon, there has to be some sort of relief outside of that. You have to do other things. You have to experience other things, right? You have and that will in turn make you a better at your job, right? Because it is life that sort of gives that to you.
And
And
three
so I think, yeah.
and 3 or 4 years later, Rodolfo AAA game coming out.
No, I don't know. I don't know about that. No, no, no. It's initially it's going to be a one man operation for sure. And I have
Yeah.
a few friends. I have a few friends that have their own projects. Some of them with huge potential. I have a friend that has a patent coming for a board game,
Oh,
and
awesome.
I would love to help them out.
That
Like
means
and
he's from Germany, right?
no, it's
No?
actually from Portugal.
Oh, nice. We
Yeah,
are also making games here in our region, like board games. That
yeah, yeah. Board games are. He's obsessed with card and board games
Yeah,
actually.
in
So
Germany there are a
oh
lot.
yeah,
Yeah,
like the biggest event for tabletop is in Germany. It's Spiel in Cologne, right? That's
yeah.
like the biggest event ever for board games. Like a
I
million
didn't
people visit it or something. Yeah,
when I was on the store there. I was looking at the games and everything. They had everything about board games, so it's a culture. Even so, with like craft beer and something like that, they
yeah,
have it's part of their culture right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. So there's another thing. Like for example, with the whole like, oh, I'm gonna lose my job. If you're a ZBrush artist,
Mate,
everything in board games is made with ZBrush.
everything.
Like
Yeah,
that whole industry is ZBrush, basically. You know what I mean? Like maybe not just ZBrush, but it's like 99%
yeah, the
is ZBrush.
figures
Like
and everything else. Even so,
yeah,
the figures behind you, like with these the green
Oh
sculpture. It's
no,
3D,
this is actually I made this actually
it's
with
3D
ZBrush.
printed, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is ZBrush TriPad. This was the first print that I did,
Nice.
and I sculpted something in ZBrush TriPad. I just wanted to sculpt something, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do a random portrait of Omar for some reason, just to an homage to my classical drawing years,
Nice.
where I drew this bastard all the time. You know. So yeah, so there's multiple industries like that. Then, and I think for me right now, like looking at those projects and some friends of mine that would love to do this and that. They have these projects in their heads and they would love to make those come to life. It would be something that I would be willing to do, like
Awesome.
help them out and create cool, small, little creative projects. You know what I mean? Like without the ambition and without the pressure of having to make it be good. It has to be good. It has to sell. It has to, you know what I mean? Like it's something that is really fun that I would love to have played when I was a kid. When I was looking at games that were very limited, and I was like, okay, I like this, the aesthetics and all of that, or the story, but there are a few things that are not because of the technology or whatever. If I had a time machine, I would just go into that time machine with that game that I just made and meet my younger self and have my younger self have the time of his life, basically. Right? Just show them the game, show the young Rodolfo the game, and then young Rodolfo would be like, "Yes, this is what I always wanted in this particular genre or whatever." You know what I mean? Like that is what I want to do, and eventually that is because again I was born, and I do believe this that I was born literally because I my first game I played was like Budokan for MS-DOS, like in '91, Prince of Persia and all of that.
Oh, that's
So I
amazing.
was literally born with games on my lap, right? So if I'm not making games, I'm not happy. I'm like absolutely miserable. Or if I'm not making art, I'm miserable. Or if one of those things needs to happen, right? So for me, the goal is to make my own kind of like personal work. That would be the the main resolution. Let's say 2025 New Year's resolution. I know those resolutions sometimes are kind of worthless. Like people go, oh, I want to go to the gym this year, and they go for like 3 or 4 times, and then they never show up again. But in this case, it's without the pressure of having to do something for this particular um, deadline or whatever, like or this particular budget or whatever. It gives me the ability to have that be the balance I need between like professional work and personal work, um, like and then social life and as well, right? So yeah, that
Awesome.
is what I want to be in a few years, like making games basically.
Yeah. What do
Regardless
you
if it's in the industry or not, and doesn't matter as long as I'm making my own projects. It's cool.
what do you want to be when you grow up? The question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, right? Like when I want to be it when I grew up, when I was again realized that this was a career, my dream was to work in those games, right?
Yeah.
Like the ones that made me interested in this industry from the start, like Sonic the Hedgehog, like Halo. Halo was a big thing. Like Doom. Doom is also a big thing. Like I remember when my dad bought Doom 2 and he had a laptop at the time, which was not common. And he was testing the laptop with Doom 2 and Half-Life and all of those games, like in 97, 96, you know? So those games that are like you have no idea how psyched I was the other night when I saw Doom the Dark Ages, like the gameplay. Dude, I couldn't sleep. I was like, what the heck? This is like the dream game for me. You know what I mean? And it is the ZBrush game, technically. So I know they use ZBrush for everything almost. So, you know, but the Doom, you know, Halo, Fable, all of those IPs, it's because I love the IP. But at the same time, I come to terms, I've matured and realized that even if that doesn't happen, it's okay because I'm not Doom. I'm not Halo. You know what I mean? I'm Rodolfo, and me as a person, if I'm born to make games, then just make games. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be freaking Doom, and it doesn't need to be uh, a Fable, or it doesn't need to be The Witcher, or you know what I mean. It needs to be something that I'm passionate about, and that's up to the individual, regardless of who's watching, might relate to this. Like it doesn't, you don't need to work in like the freaking
Yeah,
cream of the crop to be happy. You know what I
copy
mean?
paste. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
there's
simple.
so many jobs, man. Like there, people tend to look at like they go into a school and they go like, oh, I want to work at Blizzard. I want to work at, like freaking Last of Us or Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog or whatever. They always name like the top 5, top 6 studios, but like LA alone, there's like over 2,000 places where you could work. I'm not even joking. It's not even an exaggeration. It's
Yeah,
around 2,000 uh, jobs, or jobs, not places you could work in the industry, and that's more than the entire continent of Europe, just in LA, right? So in Europe as well, there's like toy companies. There's tabletop games. There's actually in video games. There's small indie companies. There's small studios. There's things you could do for architecture, for construction, for visualization, for a lot of things that you can do if you know the skill set it takes to make AAA games. You can apply them to
e-
anything,
even
right?
so, you can get more paid there.
Yeah, in some industries for sure. Like scientific, I have a friend that worked in the VFX industry a few years ago. She was a Houdini TD, like a technical director. She did a lot. Like it was her and another dude that were like the only TDs working in Houdini at this major VFX outsourcing studio, and they were doing, Hollywood films. That's what they were doing. She has a bunch of credits to her name. Eventually, she moved to a company that did scientific research and protein visualization for like a research center in Scotland or something. And she's earning 3 times as much as she was earning in the effects
Mm.
industry. It's not about the money, to be honest. It has to be something you're passionate about, right? But it is, there's so many things that people just tend to hyper focus on one industry and then hyper focus on a couple of studios, and it's like that's all there is. It's not the case, right? There's small studios sometimes with great projects, amazingly creative projects that go underlooked by potential talent, because the talent doesn't even know they're there. Just do your research. Just go on LinkedIn, go on ArtStation, there's a site called Work with Indies as well, that indie studios just go there and do job postings for contracts and whatever. And there's so many things that people could be doing that they're not. They're wasting their talent, feeling sorry for themselves because the industry is, at not the best place at the moment. It will bounce back. It's a cycle of, it goes up and down like a stock market.
It's
It
the
goes like
economy,
this.
yeah.
Yeah. So
That,
it's on a down tick, but it will have an upward spur. And so I think that is the, if you want to take anything from this interview,
yeah,
it's that don't just do what you love. It sounds so cliche, man. Just do what you love, for the sake of having fun first. There was a talk from, I don't think it's online anymore, but there was a talk at THU from Ian McKay, guy from that little book over there, Shadow Line. Uh, the guy is the artist, the guy that designed Darth Maul and Padme. He is in the behind the scenes of, the prequel trilogy in Star Wars. Like he's a big name. He's like one of the greatest artists of all time in my mind, right? And if you've met him, I did a couple of times. He's the most joyful person in the entire earth. I'm not even kidding. Like just being around him will make your depression go away. So, and the guy had this talk, and he talked about the 3 stages of being an artist. So when you start off doing art, you always start because you want to have fun, right? You're having fun. You're a kid, you're drawing, you're doodling, and you're playing around with Play-Doh, You're sculpting something really cool that you saw on TV or something. You're doing it for fun. You don't want to get better because it's not a competition. You're just having fun. And you don't want to make money because you're a kid. You don't make money out of anything, right? You're poor. You're up to your parents, basically, financial decisions, right? So, and then when you go to school for that particular thing, then it moves from being fun to being good. You want to be good. You want to have skill, right? So now it's about the skill. It's no longer about having fun. It's just skill. You want to be good. You want to learn the skills. You want to learn perspective. You want to learn anatomy. You want to learn all of those things. And then, and it's still fun because you're learning, right? And learning is fun. And you're like, okay, this is really cool. I know how to do this, how to do that. But then you need to get a job. And when you need to get a job, it stops being about having fun and having skill. And now it's about money. And that's when the stuff kind of goes haywire.
Yeah, but
Because
when you get good and afterwards it becomes fun again.
yeah, that's what I was getting at. So you need to get a job because you need to make money, right? Or otherwise you die, basically. So you need to make money. So now your focus is, how do I make money with these skills that I have, right? And first it's, how do I have these skills having fun? And then it's how to make money with these skills. And now when you're making money with it, then you kind of lost track of the fun. So you're no longer having fun. Even with this thing that you're passionate about, it might come a point when you feel like you're no longer passionate about it. That's a lie, though. That's your brain playing tricks on you. It's just that you lost track of how to have fun with what you were doing. So that is where personal artwork and personal stuff needs to come into the table as well, and having an actual life outside of, the industry and work and all of that, and reconnecting with that fun aspect is the key, because money will come as a consequence naturally if you're having fun and if you have the skills, right? If you already have the skills and then you get the job or whatever, and then you need to go back to having fun, and that is the key. And this guy, I mean, Ian McCaig, there's no concept artist in the world who would not look at Ian McCaig and say, oh, he's done it. He's done it. He's done it all, right? He's the guy that embodies Star Wars in the concept art world, right? So there's no, what else is there to shoot, right? But he doesn't see it like that. It doesn't see it like, oh, I'm going like on a staircase. It literally just has fun. He's the most fun person to be around. He's just having fun. He's like a kid, right? That's the point. Reconnecting with your inner child, so you can have fun with what you're doing for the sake of having fun. And then you're like, oh, but I should be productive or whatever. No, you shouldn't. You should be having fun. You know what I mean? That also is an antidote for imposter syndrome. That's what I've been finding out about. Like being at ease with just having fun, sometimes even taking time off. That's just, it is. Like this weekend, I'm just going to play games. I don't care, right? I'm just going to go out and run or go to the park or, feed the ducks, whatever it is, right? Just, it is what it is, and you need to be having fun because our time is limited on this point.
And also
right?
don't kill the child in yourself. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
because that's the most creative thing that is inside you.
Yeah, like we're here for a very limited amount of time, right? I think in the last few years, people have become to be more aware of that because of whatever is happening in the world, right? And if we're here for a limited amount of time and it's no fun, then it's hell, basically. Obviously, you still need responsibility because that's also a big part of life and having a moral life, let's say. But a responsibility alone is a dictatorship, right? Only responsibilities is a dictatorship, and only rights is also a anarchy, right? No responsibility is anarchy. 100% responsibility is a totalitarian regime, right? So you can't be your own dictator, right? And then just say, oh, all I need to do is work. You know what I mean? And you have to have a balance. You have to be more of like a democracy, in a sense, like where you have responsibilities and you get your rights for your responsibilities, and then you enjoy those rights. You have to enjoy. You have to put time to enjoy that part of that responsibility, what that comes with, right? The benefits of that, regardless if it's about money or not, doesn't matter. Money is not the point here that I'm trying to make. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, that's a good thing that you share for the young generation to hear about that, because it's mostly like, even so they're going to make the mistakes eventually,
mm,
and later on they're going to learn from them, and this is going to be like a ring bell on their, like a life path. But
yeah,
eventually they will do the mistakes and try to teach the new generation, and I hope somebody will learn from them.
yeah. Well, it is part of life. It's part of
Yeah,
learning, is to make mistakes and fail, but fail good. Fail hard, fail good. Fail well. You know what I
awesome.
mean? Accepting failure is a big part of becoming actually good at something. Like be willing to look like a fool, not be afraid to look like a fool. You know what I mean? When you don't know something or when you don't try something. So there's this book that's, to me, it's like my Bible, man. To that, it's called The Mastery by George Leonard. It was suggested at the time by Watts, Jeffrey Watts from the Watts Atelier. He has that book as like the guide to his whole school. Basically, his whole school is tailored around that book. Um, that and Frazetta and a few others. Um, uh, the Frank Riley as well, like the School of Frank Riley. But that book is like this size, it's very small. I read it in like in commuting in like a couple of days. So it's like in a few hours you finish that book. And I've read it multiple times. And he says that there's a key to mastery, one of the five keys that he says. And the main one is to not be scared to look like a fool, to look like you're not sufficient, because
Yeah,
that's
true.
the fear that usually prevents people from learning something new, for example, or
And being
taking
scared.
risks. Yeah, and the older you grow, the harder it is, because now you have more baggage. You have more thing. You were seen by the world more often. So now looking like a fool is even worse if you're older than when you're a kid. When you're a kid, it's like, oh, you're a kid. Like, oh, yeah, you fall
Nobody
down.
cares.
No, nobody cares. People even cheer you on. And I think that's also a big problem, because when you're a kid and you fall down, or you go play the piano and you mess everything up on purpose or whatever, people even go, yay, you're playing the piano. Yeah, go ahead, keep going. You know what I mean? Like you draw something that's like a freaking scribble. You're a kid, your drawings suck, right? But you draw and people go like, yes, yes, so much talent. Oh my God, it's wonderful. And then the kid keeps drawing, right? And eventually becomes good, right? If you don't have a teacher that kind of trashes the whole cycle like I did. But and that is what usually happens. But as an adult, when you fail and you try something new and you fail, people don't cheer you on. And you feel that failure in your brain goes like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not good. If I'm not good, it's not even worth trying. You know what I
Trying, yeah.
mean? It's like a talent thing. I struggled with this as a drawing teacher throughout my entire at the Porto Atelier with Daniel. Like he taught me how to draw, but then I started teaching there on Saturdays. Uh, and I struggle with this all the time. People coming to me and going like, "Oh, but I don't have any talent," and I'm like, "What the heck is talent? What does that mean? What is that? That is nothing. That just means to me, talent is a mix of dedication and passion for whatever you're doing. Like you need to like what you're doing, and how obsessive can you get about it. That is what they mean when they say talent, because talent there doesn't exist. There are a few people, like one in a million, that does
Yeah,
have that, but
the
you can't set a standard based on the exception. You have to set the standard based on the rule,
yeah, so
right?
mostly it's like I have talent in sports, but the talent is like just a small advantage in the beginning. So
Yeah,
just it's a small advantage, but eventually over the years that advantage is like
Yeah.
It's going to
Don't
be won by consistency.
don't get me wrong. There are people with talent, but they're very, very rare. But they
Just
are.
advantage.
But here's the thing. It might be a disadvantage. I've met some of those people, and those people. It's very easy when you're very good immediately to just stop practicing,
And be
or
lazy.
yeah, and be lazy and be like, okay, I'm already good, I don't need to improve anymore, I'm already best in my class. You know what I mean? Like growing up, everyone was like, oh my god, it's like, do the exercises, everyone except you, because you're already good, you don't need to do the exercise. I used to hate that if they did that ever to me on any subject. In college there was this teacher, drawing teacher, but I understood he came from a good spot. He was trying to, he knew that he wasn't going to teach me anything because I was being taught at the Porto Atelier. Like Daniel was teaching me how to draw, Daniel Gamelos. But the guy was very well intentioned. But at the same time, he was like, I'm going to give exercises to everyone because they're still starting out. But you do your thing. You want to do a cast drawing, go over there, do your cast drawing. You want to do perspective, go over there, do perspective. You know what I mean? So at the same time, I hated that, but I also, understand that that is the way that it needs to be. But there is a risk of you conforming to that state of being always on top, and then you don't need to put in the effort to actually make it, and then eventually people who did not have the talent become better than you because they keep going. It's like the Goku and Vegeta
Yeah.
story. You know what I mean? Goku is the low class warrior and Vegeta is the prince. He was born with the
Mm.
talent, and he realized very quickly that he needed to train. Otherwise, this low class warrior would keep beating him to shit.
We have a
Basically.
saying here, like it's
Yeah,
better to be first in the village than last in the city.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
It's a good
And
phrase that we have here.
yeah, that is exactly it. It's like you need talent to me is irrelevant. As an instructor and as a teacher, it's absolutely irrelevant. It's the dedication and it's the passion that you show towards your work that matters, because that means that eventually, even if you're not good right now, eventually you will, if you keep that passion, if you keep that dedication, eventually what will happen. It's just a natural way of life. Sometimes some people get there faster, other people's take a little longer, like me, like 10 years. You know what I mean? but
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 the reward is the same.
exactly. The
Yeah.
worth is the same because eventually they all lead to Rome. That's the saying, right? All roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
And we have that saying in Portugal. It's like
Yeah, I know
todos os caminhos vão dar a
that.
Roma. All roads lead to Rome. So they all go to Rome for the Colosseum. Wherever they practice to get there, it doesn't really matter as long as they go in the same road. They walk in the same road. Some people come from like the Ottoman Empire. Other people come from the Carthage, but they all go to Rome. You know what I mean? They all lead to the same place. That's what that saying means, and it's the same thing. Some of them take longer, some of them
Mhm.
don't. Maybe some of them are right next to Rome, so they take the road and like 10 minutes they're there.
Yeah,
Maybe not
that's
10
true.
minutes, but
That's true.
you know what I mean.
But
So
one thing that I'm very happy that we have this conversation, I will definitely look out to have another podcast with you because
okay,
there is a lot of things to be said, and also we covered the industry mostly, how to get into the industry, but I think step by step we are like involving that we should have another conversation of where the industry is going to be in like 5 or 10 years, because
hmm
it's a good thing to encourage everybody that mm, encourage everybody that the AI will just be a tool for us. But I
hmm
will definitely look out to schedule another meeting like this in like
yeah.
maximum in 1 year to see how the things evolve and what advice we should get to the incomers that are coming to this industry.
Well, I'll be more than happy to participate in that. Just hit me up whenever you want to do that, and I'll be ready. I'll be available.
Awesome.
I'm up for that. Yeah,
It was a pleasure having you, Rodolfo, and
it was very fun. Thank
see
you.
you